Any second now. It should go bloop. It's taking longer than usual. Oh, there it is. All right, cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome to March 3rd, 2020's MakerDAO community call. My name is David Utrobin. I work on community development for the Maker Foundation, and I get the pleasure of facilitating these calls every Tuesday. And if you're new to the call, we use this call kind of as just a medium to interact with the community and also to bring people up to speed on what's been going on for the last week or so in the MakerDAO universe. We also use this call to kind of see what's going on in the space, and we like having guests that are building in DeFi with DAI, specifically like doing really cool technical things. And today is going to be a great example of that because we have Nodar and Suhail from DeFiZap on the call. And if you guys don't know about DeFiZap, they're doing these really cool kind of transaction configurations where, because of DeFi, because of like the composability of Ethereum transactions, you could do multiple steps in a single, atomic transaction. And it's cool what you could do when you combine different things, right? And so DeFiZap is kind of leveraging that and uh, creating I don't want to say products, but creating tooling and definitely creating a lot of cool stuff around it. So don't hear it from me though. I'm gonna give over the mic to Nodar, who's here on the call, and I think he's got a demo and some stuff lined up for us. So yeah, Nodar, it's all you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, that was a pretty good intro. And it's basically like you said, yeah, it's like programmable DeFi strategies. So, like, based on our kind of experience, like currently DeFi is difficult to use, as we like to say it,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's only getting more and more complicated as more and more new platforms are launching, like almost on a weekly basis, right? So it's getting harder for everyone to navigate through all the available options in order to come up with a mix that basically fits their needs. So yeah, currently DeFiZap deploys capital to multiple DeFi protocols in one transaction, like you said. So giving you easy access to this predefined strategy. Uh, in the future, we're planning on tokenizing these predefined strategies to allow for even more efficient management and trading of these strategies themselves.
Oh, that's interesting. Tokenizing it? How does that work? If it's like a transaction, what would you be tokenizing? You'd be tokenizing the capital like on a schedule doing the certain transaction, or
Yeah, good question. So, like a good example of something that would be tokenized would be something like our DAI LLP Zap. So, DAI LLP is basically like leverage liquidity pooling. So, it kind of helps you maintain 100% ETH exposure
uh-huh.
when getting into a pool. So, basically, right now, it's a mix of both an LP and a tokenized leverage position that you're getting back to your wallet. But in the future, you're gonna get back just one token, which would represent both.
Ah, I see. Okay, so it would be tokenizing the position itself created by the Zap.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
think
got
of
it.
it as like, I guess, like I guess some examples would be like, tokenized as like ETFs, index funds. Yeah.
So so tell me a bit about like yourself and even Suhail. Maybe afterwards you could tell a bit about yourself as well. But how did you guys get started on the project and kind of yeah.
Yeah, for sure. DeFi Zap was kind of born out of, I like to say, like out of user feedback and constant like iteration. So I myself started making this educational tool DeFi tutorials back in the summer, last summer, and just from some user feedback, came up with like DeFi strategies, which is like educational simulator, helping people kind of play around with the underlying DeFi protocols without actually putting their real money behind it. And then from some more feedback from there, this where idea for DeFi Zap was born, and I saw uh, actually Kyber's DeFi hackathon going on around that same time. So I just reached out on their Discord looking for help because I realized this was going to be a bigger scope project, and that's where I connected with Deepesh, and so he'll join us right after we ended up like winning that hackathon. So he'll join us right after that. So
Oh, nice! You actually won that.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I was
congrats!
surprised myself, but yeah, we applied like it was 2 weeks before the deadline before we started like working on it. It was a virtual hackathon. It was going on for like 3 months or something, like 90 days.
Yeah, I remember. I remember.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, definitely something that gave us obviously a huge push to keep building. So, we came out right after that with like our signature Unipools apps, which help you get into Uniswap pools with just one token, kind of abstracting a lot of the interactions that go in the background if somebody wants to come in with just one asset. So yeah, and after that we came up with those DIA LPs to help you keep the leverage, and then we have a lot more coming up. So it's kind of like we have like 30 new apps that we're ready to launch, but it's all about like easing users into this experience, right? Kind of, we want to get them almost addicted to these apps and then tokenize the most used strategies.
Nice. So, are these zaps? Can other like third party, like guys like InstaDApp or Zerion or whoever, can they put in like a button that just says, "Here's this kind of zap"? Is it kind of modular? Is it Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's
yeah,
exactly what we've been doing with a few people already. So like pools that
nice.
FYI, it was our first example. They integrated us, kind of added a one button to add liquidity.
Oh, sweet.
Frontier Wallet added. They have this entire section for so it's really easy to, yeah, like you said, like integrate DeFiZap. As a matter of fact, like we created ENS behind each Zap, so like you can send ETH directly from your wallet to something like mkrunipool.defizap.eth, and you'll become a liquidity provider in Uniswap with a maker pool.
Wow,
So
that's actually that's fascinating. That's cool. Right on. So, I know you might have something to demo for us or to show us today. Yeah.
yeah, sure thing. Let me share my screen. Was
And by the
basically
way,
going.
anybody on the call who this is kind of the usual drill, but if you guys have questions or anything, feel free to hop on the mic. This is a super laid back call, and it's meant to be kind of like an exploratory session. If you're interested in talking with the creators of this cool thing, and also if you don't have a mic, feel free to like type it in the chat. I'm happy to read it out for you and ask for you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to take any questions. So yeah, there's like two ways that you can go about. You can when you visit our page, you can click Get Started and go through a survey, which basically asks you some basic questions to help you filter out available zaps. Or you can go straight to Explore Zaps page, which basically lists all of our available zaps. To go through,
How long does it take to code up one of these apps? They
uh,
seem pretty light.
yeah. So one exactly. So once we have like an integration, like with like once we have like a part with Uniswap adding liquidity done, and a part with placing a leverage trading done, it's easy then to mix and match them. Actually, the next thing we're gonna launch is something where we help you kind of uh select your proportionally how much you actually want to put into each allocation within this app.
Oh, that's
uh
fascinating.
yeah, and then like select like leverage amount. So as I'm sure you recently heard about the recent thing with BZX and their fulcrum margin, so we had to
Yeah,
pause those apps that were integrated with that platform, but we are currently working on re-enabling it with some alternative options. So you'll have an option, whichever underlying platform you trust for leverage trading, you would basically choose that one to process your trade.
nice.
Uh, so yeah, like a simple example would be if you, by the way, if you click learn more for each Zap, we try to have like a visual of exactly what's going on in the background. And there's a detailed tutorial that I'm still publishing on the DeFi Tutorials newsletter, which I started all the way back last summer. So this has tutorials for like all the zaps and all the underlying platforms that we're using too. So
Right on.
it gets pretty detailed, but at the same time, yeah, some of them are already outdated, so they do need some work. In any case, something simple like getting into a MKR pool on Uniswap with just your input, it gets split into two halves. As I'm sure you know, you have to provide liquidity when you're coming into a Uniswap pool from two sides of the trading pair.
Yeah.
And also keep in mind, we recently enabled not only ETH inputs, but you could also come in with something like Maker, and your Maker will get split into half of it into ETH, and then that would be provided as a liquidity on Uniswap.
Right on.
Um, to get into something a little bit more complex, I guess, with a little bit more steps, would be something like the Chai unit pool. So with this one, instead of going directly into Chai, which would kind of experience a pretty big slippage on if you were directly to do it on the Uniswap pool,
Right.
which doesn't have a lot of liquidity. So we wanted to encourage more liquidity around this pool. So what we did was when the liquidity provider decides to enter this pool with say ETH, half of the proceeds are first turned in, converted into DAI, which has good liquidity and there's like very little slippage that you experience there, and then convert this into Chai and then provide the liquidity into the pool.
Nice. And just for context, I know some people we take for granted certain terms. So slippage, just for people that might not trade on a regular basis or might not think about this, is if you're making a trade for something, let's say $100 worth of DAI for ETH. Depending on the size of the market, if the trade is either is too large for the market, you're going to experience kind of a discount. So instead of getting $100 of ETH back, if the market was really thin, you might get like $98 or $97 of ETH. And yeah, and so Nodar is actually showing right here that you could see kind of the numbers for predicted amounts of slippage there on like the interface. Yeah, expected slippage. Uh, so yeah, so just wanted to explain for the peeps that don't know what slippage means.
And you see, if I were to go directly into Chai, the slippage is over 10%. But if
Yeah,
you
that's
were to go into
that's
DAI,
rough.
yeah, if you were going to DAI, it's literally less than a tenth of a percent. So
Yeah,
with the same
yeah,
amount.
that's smart. That's exactly a thoughtful and the right way to do that zap. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
right
and
on.
we're planning on further making it better by integrating some like 1 inch for the slips for the splits that we're doing.
Nice,
Uh,
nice.
so yeah, to move on to I guess something like the DAI LLP, which I mentioned, it puts 66% into a pool, 34% um, into a 2x position. So if you take it from like a 3 ETH example, 1 ETH will go to a 2x position, giving you exposure to 2 ETH, and then 2 ETH will get split up into two halves. So 1 ETH would be converted to DAI, so you'd be left over 1 ETH on this side and 2 ETH exposure from this side, so leaving you exposure to 3 ETH. Actually, the one that we're actually working on, and we'll release this soon, is the one where to keep your ETH exposure, we are gonna put a portion of your ETH into a Maker Vault, draw a die against it, and then put that die with the leftover ETH to go into a pool. So
Oh,
we've noticed some feedback around there. Like, yeah, some people are actually doing this manually right now. So we'll basically automate this step. So yeah, it's like you're generating the die necessary enough to go into a pool with the leftover ETH input that you're coming
that's
in.
smart. That's smart. All right, I see a question in the chat from Richard James Lopez. Do users have a growing appetite for more staked zaps? Am I reading it correctly that only 1 out of 18 of zaps are based on staking?
So this one actually, I'm assuming this one, people are talking about the Seth Unipool. right? Because this one has this. This is actually something we literally launched a couple of hours ago. So the
Haha.
reason, yeah, yeah. So this one has staking rewards because the synthetics community is incentivizing you to pool Seth and ETH on Uniswap with extra SNX rewards. So by adding liquidity on Uniswap for this pool, you're going to be receiving extra SNX to your wallet in addition to like the trading fees that you're going to be receiving from pool. So actually,
Oh,
this is something that I could see other communities start doing, and we actually have a cool thing that's tokenized that's launching around this. So perhaps something that maker community could also utilize to basically incentivize pooling on Uniswap with extra incentives in addition to to just the trading fees that you're receiving by having liquidity there. It's especially useful for something like pools with less liquidity because it's hard to bootstrap that initial liquidity and bring in those initial liquidity providers in Uniswap. So I see a lot more communities utilizing this tactic to bootstrap that initial liquidity. It would be called like incentivized liquidity pooling (ILP).
nice. Yeah, yeah. You're incentivizing it through additional staking rewards. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah, exactly. So in this example that we launched today, we just helping people stake their LP tokens, which they zap themselves into.
And it
So
looks like at least one really large customer really likes this app. 6,000 ETH already used in it, and you guys only launched it a few hours ago.
no, no. So the staking we launched a few hours ago. This Ethereum
Oh,
app has been available, yeah, for quite a while. There's been a lot of users for it. So if you
okay,
actually, as I mentioned, every contract has a ENS name registered to it. So for
right.
this one, it would be like setUnipol.defizap.eth, and you could actually see all the transactions here that are
So, so question for you then. So when you change a zap, what happens to the positions previously made through the zap? Are they
Oh,
still able to zap out, or like, yeah,
yeah,
just
exactly.
technically, how does it work?
So that's the cool thing about DeFiZap right now is that yeah, when you are zapping yourself into like a particular when you're using a particular zap, you're getting back the same exact liquidity tokens that you would mint when you're using Uniswap directly. So
Nice.
after zapping in, it's basically like we have no um, this is why a lot of people have been showing interest in integrating because yeah, we don't have like any control over your tokens, of course, and then it's not like we're locking yours up in like some extra smart contract to give you then the rights on these liquidity tokens. So it's literally
Right.
the same tokens that you would get from Uniswap again. It's just abstracting a lot of the steps in the background. Yeah.
That's really cool. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and like I said, you could see like for example, somebody literally just a couple of seconds ago zapped them with like 2 ETH into the set pool. So in return, they received this many LP tokens. So these are the pool
And so
tokens.
the input here was 2 ETH. It sold the ETH for the synth, or converted the ETH into synth ETH, and then obviously probably it kept some ETH for the other side of the market.
Exactly, exactly. So only this much Seth ETH was used in order to add liquidity. And
Yeah.
as you can see, this was basically not used. And this is something that was returned back to the user's wallet.
Mm.
So there's like that little residual that sometimes gets left over, which basically is not used to for the liquidity provisioning. So
So so so zapping in, I get. When you zap out, if the zap changes and there's like some component that has like a zero balance, it it's just like a withdrawal, right? It's like it's just a transaction that withdraws, right? Essentially,
so when you're zapping out, it's
withdraws and then
it's like
converts. Right?
you're redeeming your these tokens that you originally got from Uniswap.
Yeah.
You are you are redeeming it, so you're taking out exactly from Uniswap. So the same way. So like there's
Does it
nothing that yeah.
does it come back as the original input, like in purely ETH, or it actually just
Oh yeah, so
withdraws everything to your wallet as is after you zapped in?
yeah, actually, so let me show you an example. You actually have a couple of options there. So let me go to a
Ooh,
wallet
options. That's fun.
uh, just to quickly this wallet. Sorry, just so many wallets here.
Yeah, no worries, man. No worries. I'm just reading
uh,
through the chat. Frank Cruz asks, any possibility of creating a flash loan zap in the near future?
yeah, yeah. A lot of people have been asking about that. Something we're definitely looking into and I've tested out, worked on. So for in the case where with staking, you can actually like manage your stake in terms of like right now
Oh,
I have
nice.
yeah right now I have this many pool tokens staked, right? So I can stake additional pool tokens, which I still have in my wallet, right? Which are not staked, but these are staked. So these are generating SNX rewards. And I generated so far very little, but I just did it just earlier today. So what you could do is you could just claim the rewards. You could just withdraw your pool tokens that you have staked, or you can exit both the rewards and the set tokens. Now, when you're zapping out of your LP token, out of your pool balance. So essentially, this is the balance that I have right now in my wallet, and I can choose how I want to receive my proceeds in. I could receive them the same way as it is on Uniswap with ETH and Seth. So, as I'm sure you know, when you're removing liquidity from Uniswap, you also receive two tokens. But if you want to receive it back as ETH or Seth or DAI, you could also do that. There is a small convenience fee we're like testing out, which basically we're going to use for our audit. But yeah, it's something that are like testing out, so it's like a
Right
convenience
on.
of instead of having two tokens back, you're bringing back just one. So from the investor's perspective, you're like zapped in with one token and you zapped out with a single token. You kind of have a very clear snapshot of your ROI.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's actually something I was gonna ask is what's kind of the business model or what's the plan for your team to actually like, why are you guys doing this from a financial perspective? Like what's the plan?
Yeah, yeah. This is not something we're gonna have long term. What we will have is basically we'll most likely have a fee on the the profit when you're exiting or redeeming your tokenized strategy. So when you're redeeming your tokenized strategy, basically goes a portion of those profits goes into a pool, and we actually plan on having plan on opening up a floor for anyone to create this tokenized Zap, right, and essentially make a living from it. So we want to have a
Oh,
DAO
that's really
structure,
cool.
basically a DAO structure that basically controls the voting and new Zap deployments through governance. Yeah.
What would stop somebody from just creating their own Zap? It's just the availability through like your UIs and stuff.
So yeah, you mean like what stops anyone from basically forking, like creating their own Zaps, like basically the same thing as we have, but like taking off a fee or something?
Yeah, like specifically like in regards to like the DAO idea for like deploying Zaps and stuff like that. Why
Oh yeah.
wouldn't somebody just do it on their own, or they're
Oh
just
yeah, yeah,
leveraging kind
yeah.
of the network and the UIs?
They're leveraging the liquidity that will be built around these tokenized Zaps. So basically, the tokenized Zaps will be very efficient because of the fact that there'll be liquidity built around them. So you'll be
Okay.
able to. So yeah, when the new person launches, basically you know they're launching on DeFiZap not only because of like the brand and the initial exposure that they'll get, but mainly because of this bootstrap liquidity that they're provided. It's like a floor for creating your own financial instruments. Like that's our like goal to like democratize access to the creation of new financial instruments.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Brian wrote, "OMG, one transaction leverage long options if you scroll down." Yeah, I think even DeFiZap is trying to do that. I think they said that they're launching like a one-click leverage long option in like a few hours. But yeah, right on. Cool.
Yeah,
So
leverage is obviously, the market is on the uprise, so leverage
oh
is
yeah,
definitely getting popular.
oh
Um,
yeah,
but yeah, with us, yeah, like in my view, like each one of these underlying platforms are doing amazing things, right? But in combination, you could come up with like brand new use cases.
right.
And at the end of the day, further user adoption for the underlying protocols themselves. It's not like, uh, yeah, I feel like the really big bottleneck right now is a lot of new users basically are not coming in because they're confused of what's going to happen to their money. So they do need these prepackaged deals essentially.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I see this kind of like infrastructure for really easy one-click options for users on like on the other end, right? It's really, really cool stuff. Do you guys have any apps that are integrated with like Oasis or DSR or like yeah, I guess there's so many ideas for Zaps, right? That you guys
Well,
are
yeah,
kind of
with the
just
with the
building the tools for anybody to create like a custom Zap. Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah, with the DSR would be like the chai in the pool.
Right,
But
right,
yeah,
right.
as you see, like a lot of them are around liquidity provisioning on Uniswap, and sometimes they touch something like the DSR, where it's by the nature of obviously holding chai as one of the proportions in the pool.
Nice.
But yeah, like I
So,
said, we have a lot more coming up. Like it's just like we already, as you can see, have a lot listed here,
uh
and we do need to improve the UI of actually like showing them in comparisons
sure, sure.
and combine a lot of them. Like we launched this like general Unipool, which basically helps you get into any pool on Uniswap. Basically, there's like a lot of them now.
So let me ask you, you mentioned that that one little 1% is going towards funding like code audits. Like, so tell me a bit more about the landscape of code security for DeFi Zaps. Uh, are there kind of like core components to creating a Zap that need to be audited, or does technically like each individual Zap need to be audited? Like, kind of yeah, what's the security roadmap, all that good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So, as I said before, like in terms of the current state of Zaps, because of the fact that they are basically think of them like gateways to underlying DeFi protocols. So once you zap in, basically we have no
Right.
way of controlling yours, and it's basically the same thing as using the underlying protocols. So as it currently stands, we didn't need to have like I guess like an audit at this stage. So what we're doing an audit for is for these the tokenized apps, right? Which would actually, yeah. So like I guess you could say the V2. We have one actually coming up. We've been speaking with a gentleman from the Ethereum Foundation. He's been kind of like they have this program where they help you. I guess go through this initial just audit, initial take, but we are
uh,
planning to go through an extensive audit before we, of course, launch anything on that front.
yeah, that's really really good to hear. It's really cool. Yeah, I guess maybe one other thing, especially like since the whole BZX flash loan thing happened, is I know people are very mindful about transparency regarding the risks of using various like types of zaps, and of course like the risk is located not just in the protocol itself, like on like maybe a technical level, but like the financial risks of doing like multiple steps at once, like creating certain positions, right? Like if you're creating like a maker vault at the same time as a Uniswap pool and putting that together, you know, like kind of. I guess what's my question here? My question is like yeah, do you guys feel that there is an onus or like any type of responsibility to kind of maybe have some sort of risk measure for certain types of zaps, or like some risk disclaimer or something to help the user understand the risk they're taking.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, 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 definitely. The disclaimers, and also we're planning to integrate like something like DeFi score, so kind of help kind of measure the aggregate risk score of all the underlying platforms that the Zap is touching. So yeah, like definitely have a high attention on that. We're already doing some internal testing before we, of course, launch these apps.
Right.
Um, and that's kind of the reason why we've been holding off from like really kind of just keep launching a lot of news, especially around like leverage trading, right? It's something that people need to be aware of when they're getting liquidated, what that even means, right? A lot of
Hmm.
people just don't are coming in like basically with almost no financial background. I was even surprised, even people who've been in Ethereum for like longer than I have, sometimes have problems kind of removing liquidity from Uniswap. So like something just as easy as that is kind of a hurdle on the users.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Right on. Well, all right, we're coming up at we're what, minute 36 of the hour. Uh, Thank you so much for coming on the call. This was really fascinating, and I'm gonna leave it open for the next few minutes. Just if anybody in the chat wants to ask anything I might have missed, or have any specific comments or feedback about what Nodar showed us, feel free to jump in.
Hey, Nodar, quick question.
Hmm.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So I went on DAO House. I think it's one of these DAO websites. And I see that you have a DAO there. Is that still active, or was that something you were experimenting with in the past?
Yeah, no, it's something that I just was experimenting with. So yeah, don't like put any money in there.
Okay.
um,
Can you
yeah,
talk about the future DAO that you were thinking of that you brought up earlier?
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's like we're working on a paper around this, which will be actually introduced pretty soon. But yeah, it will be around opening up the floor for I could mention before creating your own zaps and essentially making a living from that. So yeah.
So
Got it.
question about that. So the people in the DAO, they would be providing uh what exactly? They'd be providing the composed zap. They'd be collecting whatever percentage of commissions on the profits on the zaps that they launch as a group. And would they need like would they be the ones giving liquidity? I'm trying to understand kind of the role of the members of the DAO
Yeah, there will be a
besides just
couple of
creating the zaps.
right. Yeah, there will be definitely a couple of different types of members in the DAO, and something we're currently finalizing. But some would be incentivized to create the zaps. Others would be incentivized to keep the underlying platform developed. So, like when essentially when people are deploying their zaps, you can think of we're also would be providing like an audit service, because all those voting would need to be sure that the zap that this zap creator created is up to par with the
Right.
standard. And then of course there could be you know there could be some incentivized token provisioning for zap creators when they're reaching like certain milestones. Um but yeah,
Nice.
in general, the holders would be entitled to like the accrued proportionally, like from the incentive pool, like you said, kind of like the commission fees.
Yeah.
They would they'll pay less fees by holding the token, and also they'll get voting rights on what happens in the DAO ultimately.
Right on. Thanks. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much, Nodar. And I know your teammate Suhail is also in here. But Nodar stole the show. But either way, it was a pleasure having you both
Definitely not.
in here.
Honestly, a lot of it is my team for sure.
Oh, I bet. Of course.
Everyone is like working really hard. It's like 3 of us full time, and Deepesh is out in Singapore, Sahil is in Alberta, Canada, and I'm in New York. So
Oh,
it's like
nice.
we're all on like all all different time zones, always cranking out. Someone's always up, so always feel free to join us on our Discord, ask any questions. We're always
Right
there.
on. Right on. Yeah, great stuff, guys. Great stuff. All right.
Thanks a lot, man.
No problem. So for the next part of the call, we're going to be going through kind of the usual agenda, and if you want to follow along and have access to all the links of all the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, I just put a link in the chat. And for those of you watching like the recording on YouTube, feel free to like go down into the description. I link the agenda archive per year there, so you could see everything from 2019, everything from 2020. And obviously, today's is going to be in the 2020 doc. So let me actually present my own screen. Actually, here, let me do it like this. So it's not, I have a vertical monitor, so I just want to make sure that it's the windows formatted in a way that's not going to look tiny on your screens. All right, cool. So all right, so I'm going to run through kind of the usual stuff. So the first thing I go through is governance. So the current state of governance. There is an executive vote that went out on Friday, the 28th, that is currently stalled. There's about 35,000 MKR voting for it, but around 85,000 MKR still protecting the original proposal. So for it to pass, it has to surpass that. So at the moment, it's stalled, and there's been some conversations about why. And before I actually get into why, let me actually kind of show you guys what the proposal is. So the proposal is for 3 different changes. One of the changes, if this will ever load, one of the changes is actually, oh yeah, I have it here. So let me. So one of the changes is to lower the PSI debt ceiling by 5 million to 25 million PSI. This is just good practice as a risk measure, since single collateral DAI is continuing slowly to shrink. The other is to lower the DAI ETH debt ceiling by 20 million. So currently it's at 150, and we want to lower it to, and by we I mean Maker Governance wants to lower it to 130 million. So right now it's at 150, and this is also as a risk measure, and I'll explain why we want to lower it, and why it's not good to have too big of a buffer between the supply and the debt ceiling. And then the third change is actually to increase the DAI savings rate spread from 0, which it currently is at, to 1%, which means that if the stability fee is 8%, then the DSR would drop down to 7%. And currently, since the spread is at 0 and the stability fee is 8%, that's why we're seeing a 8% DSR. All right, so the current executive is stalled, and some people are speculating on why, and I think it's twofold. So some people obviously don't agree with lowering or actually increasing the DSR spread. Yeah, increasing the DSR spread, because there's a lot of conversation in the community about the reasoning for keeping it at 0 from a business perspective, because a good DSR rate is actually like a positive feedback loop for DAI adoption, because it actually increases demand for DAI, which yeah, it's just a positive feedback loop. So people don't want there to be a 1% spread. That's one of the reasons. But of course, that also jeopardizes the other 2 things that have to happen, which from a risk perspective are pretty important. But some people don't really understand why, and I don't blame them, because it took me a little bit of time to even wrap my head around it. So I'm going to try to kind of give an example and a succinct explanation. So So here's the idea. So the idea is that if ETH crashes more than 34% in an hour, there's an attack that vault holders can do to actually come out ahead. And so here's the thing. So in the Maker protocol, there's a delay on the reference price that the Oracle produces. So if ETH is crashing, the price that the vault actually registers and reacts to is only going to happen an hour after that price is there on the market. So as an example, right, let's say we have a vault with 1 ETH at $150 ETH, right, and 50 DAI debt drawn against it. That's a 300% collateralization ratio, so pretty healthy vault. So price of ETH drops to $90 within 1 hour. That's a 40% drop, right? The vault owner has no incentive to save the vault, but actually has an incentive to draw max DAI. And the reason for that is because if the price is still registering at 150 while the market is saying 90, he could still draw another 50 DAI before he hits that 150% minimum collateralization ratio. So he can draw up to 100 DAI. But you see the problem here. If 1 ETH is worth 90 and he's able to draw up to 100, he actually comes out ahead 10 DAI ahead of the ETH value locked. And so this is kind of a problem. And mathematically, it works out to the tolerances. If ETH drops 34% or more in an hour, this attack is available, right? And it doesn't really matter. Like, all right, maybe like one ETH vault or the current ETH vaults will do this, like some small subset will do this. Yeah, that's not really an issue. The real issue is that if somebody has like 10,000 ETH off the platform and they know for a fact that ETH, they can get like more money against their ETH than it's actually worth in the market, that incentivizes them to throw it into the Maker protocol and take out the maximum debt because their ETH is about to be worth a whole lot less. And so the more buffer there is between the total DAI supply and the debt ceiling, that's the total amount of kind of attack surface for this attack. And there's obviously ways to mitigate it, but this is kind of a conversation that is emerging now. But this is exactly the reasoning for having a very tight debt ceiling to supply spread. And so if I think before we were trying to keep a spread within 25 million. I know at one point we were trying to keep it within 10 for single collateral DAI. But regardless, if you're an MKR voter and owner, this is something that you should be cognizant of, because although you're setting the DAI savings rate spread to 1%, and it's like maybe not good for business in your opinion, you're sacrificing this kind of protection right now, because I think according to DAI stats, we're at I think 110 million DAI from ETH with 150 million debt ceiling. That's a $40 million potential for basically, yeah. So let's say it's like 10%. They come out ahead. Yeah, it's a good amount of lost of losses, estimated loss. It's not good. You don't want this to happen. But of course, it's that's assuming that ETH drops at least 34% or more within an hour. So yeah, just kind of as good practice, this is a really good idea to keep tight spreads. So hopefully that was a decent explanation.
Hey, David, I have a question. So you explained that there's essentially just overall, it's really helpful for the community to kind of know these things. To what extent do you think like the whales know this dynamic and know like that, 34% drop in an hour sort of this mechanism?
Yeah, sure. So the question was, so how do we think that, how aware do I think that whales are of this dynamic? It's kind of hard to say, because there's not a very clear like medium of communication between whales and the public. Like we don't really know what the whales are thinking, which is an issue that is being discussed in maker governance, and we're thinking of ways to close that gap. For example, like during voting, giving people kind of a box to say why they voted for the way they voted, or even giving voters an option to write an on-chain message with their vote, things like that. But I don't think most Maker whales probably know about this, because I barely knew about this, and I live and breathe Maker, right? And not only that, because it's kind of in the domain of risk, it takes a lot to understand the concept of kind of a unique attack, and that's kind of why I took the time today to try to explain it. So hopefully, if any MKR whales are listening to this call, they can understand the importance of a tight spread between the ETH debt ceiling, the debt ceiling in general, and the amount of DAI supply. And of course, like this is something that is important for the protocol in general moving forward. It's the education of voters about kind of the recommendations of somebody like an interim risk team, because right now this is the recommendation, right? Keep a tight spread. But the question of why is where it gets really hard. You could take, Cyrus's word for it. Bad things will happen. But it's important to kind of illustrate, in my opinion, it's really important to get that education and transparency down. And actually, I think in one of the threads in the forums this week, here, need more explanation on vote proposals, addresses exactly that. So it's kind of helping MKR voters understand the reasoning behind certain recommendations and being more transparent about that. So yeah, it's kind of a challenge for education, but I think most Maker whales probably don't know about this. Yeah, no problem. All right, so moving forward, the last exec was the one that I discussed last week. It passed on last week on the 21st, and so this is the current one that's being voted on that's stalled. Besides that, there's 4 governance polls that came out on Monday. I'll kind of list each of them. 3 of them are the usuals: the size stability fee adjustment, which the current option winning is 13.5% with very little MKR, so this might not mean anything come Thursday, which Thursday is when each of these 4 votes ends. So they're each on a 3-day duration. So if you're an MKR holder, you could vote for the size stability fee, the DAI stability fee on both ETH and BAT vaults, and then also the DSR spread adjustment. Which current winning option is 0%. So right now it's 1%, and it looks like MKR voters are fighting to get it back down to 0%, which is really cool to see. And then the 4th one, which is a non-recurring governance poll, is the DSR spread polling cadence poll. So what happened last week was there was a governance poll that asked, do we want to reduce the amount of times that we're polling for the DSR spread adjustment? So right now we poll for this every week. And the idea actually behind changing it to a spread adjustment rather than voting for the rate directly itself was to reduce the overhead on governance, so that we could frame that decision a little bit differently, and also hopefully reduce the amount of times we have to vote for it. Because then we could just vote for the stability fee, and the DSR would follow in tandem with whatever we decide the spread should be, right? And so there was a governance. There was a forum poll, which is not an on-chain vote. There was a forum poll, and the winning options were split between having the DSR spread adjustment vote once per month and once biweekly. And so what we saw last week was we voted for once a month, and that failed. So people do not want to vote on the spread once a month. And so this week we're polling for the 2-week option, which was the close second. And yeah, that's what's happening. The current winning option is yes, but again, with very low MKR. But I highly encourage you guys to vote on this. I think well, I'm not gonna give you guys what I think. I'm gonna try to keep this as non-editorialized as I can. But yeah, go vote. Yeah, and I think actually there is one thing that was discussed in Thursday's governance call regarding kind of rates and how quickly MKR voters decide to change them. I hope I could articulate it well enough, but the idea was that if you change rates like really quickly, you are kind of cutting yourself at the knees from understanding what effects the rate changes even initially had on your goal, right? Like, okay, if the DAI peg is off and you're changing something week to week, like you don't know the delay of your action. You don't know if it might take 2 or 3 weeks to see kind of that correlation there, uh, especially because things like the DAI peg aren't just affected by the rates; they're affected. I know it's been kind of documented and seen. DAI peg is very much a function of like ETH price, for example. When ETH price is going up, or rather, sorry, when we just saw this actually this week, when ETH price is going down, the DAI peg tends to jump up above $1 because people are selling ETH to DAI disproportionately compared to the people that are selling DAI and buying ETH. so yeah, so the argument in the governance call made by like several people was we should keep rates kind of more consistent and be slower to change them uh, just for the sake of being able to get more accurate data about their effects. And so that's kind of an open discussion. It's like not a binary thing. It's not like we have to do this, like this is mandated. No, this is just something to think about from like a systems perspective, right? Because the changes that you make don't always happen instantly. There's time delays and there's confounding variables to be considered. And if we want to get accurate understanding of how our governance decisions affect DAI and affect the system, it's important to kind of tune at the pace of our changes to help with that. So that was the argument. I hope that was decently articulated. But yeah. Yeah, so the summary of the Thursday's risk and governance call is up. If you guys don't have an hour every week, me and a few contributors put together this bullet point summary with links, and even all the discussions are kind of captured here. So yeah, all the slides, if there are any. We also put video anchors on every single one of these sections. So if you're particularly interested in let's say oracles or like Vishesh's analysis or Primosh's analysis, you could skip ahead and kind of mix and match and see what you're interested in. So check that out. And also, if you're interested in helping produce the summary, reach out to me because we are always looking for contributors to do that. Yeah. All right. We got about 3 minutes left on the call, so I'm gonna try to run through really quickly the rest of the agenda. Yeah, governance at a glance is a great thread to kind of get a quick snapshot of the most recent conversations and things that are happening. The one signal request that's really active this week is the ranked choice voting as an option for governance polls. So I mentioned that we're doing a second poll for the DSR polling cadence question, but if we had ranked choice voting, we could have avoided this basically. So check it out. I think most of the community is actually for it. And I know that people on our team have said there's no technical like limitation on doing this in the UI or anything like that. So check it out. Yeah, there's also been a huge question of with the whole ProgPal thing happening this week of should MKR governance get involved with Ethereum hard forks? And this was a question posted on the forum by Cyrus. And likewise, I highly recommend you guys read through Cyrus's tweet storm about this. But you know, a hard fork of Ethereum, a contentious hard fork of Ethereum today, is not the same as a contentious Ethereum hard fork of a couple of years ago, and that's largely because of DeFi. So highly recommend you read this. Yeah, that's all I'll kind of say on that. Yeah, mentioned that a little bit earlier. So there's also a really cool thread and comment on how to audit executive contract code. So whenever there's an executive vote in governance, it's kind of like, as a non-technical person, I always kind of question, like, all right, who's checking this thing? Like, am I actually voting for a stability fee increase, or like, or did they screw up the decimal point, right? So our team has been doing a lot of work to make it a lot easier. So there's kind of, and this is going to get captured elsewhere to be a bit more discoverable, but Christopher Mooney, who's on our smart contracts team, did a fantastic job in trying to explain how to audit it. But as really quickly, and I'm going to have him here in a few weeks to do this himself, but really quickly, our team has been doing kind of a lot of stuff like this, where inside of the vote itself, they're starting to put notes and links and explanations of certain calls and parameter adjustments and all that good stuff, so that it's more readable for the non-technical person. And ideally, if you're just a casual MKR voter, I highly recommend you kind of read through the most recent ones. The most recent ones have even more stuff. So yeah. And I'm gonna have Chris actually come on the call on March 24th, and we're gonna do like a live audit of whatever the active executive vote is. So that's gonna be fun. Yeah, partnerships I'll skip over. From the foundation, we have a couple blog posts: Making Maker, February 2020 edition, and then another kind of introductory article into crypto about DLT technology and kind of what it does for trust. All right, we're an hour in. There's still 12 people on the call. I could really quickly run through this. So yeah, Chris Bleck introduced his website DeFi Watch. There's been a huge emphasis on kind of code security and user risks. Compound governance was introduced through a Medium post. Pool Together released a post on the risks involved with using Pool Together. I think largely because of what's been going on with the flash loans and everybody's focus on the risks users are going through. Mariano Conti posted an explainer on how to run your own local version of Oasis Borrow and Save, which is really cool if you're scared of trusting kind of a UI or a website that's like not controlled by you to access your position. Yeah, I mentioned Cyrus's tweet storm. A few developer creations. There was a really cool new project called SaveDAI, and it combines like DSR and like DAI that earns that is able to earn like through Compound or Fulcrum or wherever, with this new KYC-less positional insurance offered by Open. And so now you can actually have a tokenized like insured DAI, and you don't need KYC, and it's actually really revolutionary and cool. So highly encourage you guys to check that out. Obviously, it's super new, super nascent, but I think this is just step one of a lot of cool stuff we're going to see in the future, and not just with DAI, but if you have KYC-less insurance on stuff, like that's a really cool tool in DeFi in general. We got so Spells FYI, I know the website isn't up yet, but this was really cool. It makes you doing time-locked variables a bit more easier for protocols. Yeah, click on that if you're curious. I probably won't do it justice to explain it here. DaiAuctions.com got a few more upgrades, which is really cool. I am gonna read your comment in 1 second, Mustafa. Let me just really quickly finish this up. Yeah, there was a great article on comparing Maker protocol management apps like Oasis, Zerion, DeFiZaver, and InstaDApp. I think the DeFiZaver guys actually, it's their article, so check it out. Notable threads: Adrian has been kicking butt with his weekly Maker Holder Digest, and it's been getting better and better every week. Highly suggest you guys give him feedback. He's super receptive to it, and he wants to make a great resource that is available for you guys as a quick snapshot if you don't have time to do all your homework as a Maker Holder. yeah, notable threads. Highly suggest you read through these. I'm kind of gonna skip over them. Real life events. These are all on the website, so you can check them out. But most of them are this week in Paris, London, and Frankfurt. And yeah, we don't got time for the system segment of the week, so yeah, I'm gonna skip over that. Right on. So let me stop presenting and let me check out the chat. I know there's something in here. Mustafa writes, hey David, stumbled into this call while doing some research on DAI. I work for BitPay and some of us have been considering building a case for DAI acceptance. Let me know if you'd be interested in talking soon. Yeah, sure. I could probably put you in touch with Greg. He's our head of BD and he works with people interested in integrating DAI and all that good stuff. So I will actually, Mustafa, if you're on the call, still, I don't know if you left.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Yeah. So here, I put Greg's email there. If you want, you could email him directly. And he's usually super responsive. But I'll actually ping him now and let him know that you guys reached out to me.
Cool.
And then Adrian, yeah, no problem. And then Adrian wrote spells.fyi demo is in that link. Oh, cool. So I'm gonna actually link and put it in here so it's discoverable.
Hey, David, I got a couple of questions if you have a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, first of all, nice to see you. I've missed a couple weeks in a row, so hope everything's going well.
Cheers. Yeah.
So I'm working on a project right now with a couple of guys. Basically, we're trying to design I know I've talked to you before about closed-end structured credit products. We've talked about collateralized loan obligations. And effectively, what we're trying to do is design a miniature version of this with digital assets as like a proof of concept to prove that this works. As part of this, I was exploring the DSR for the first time, and I'm having trouble. Is there someone I can reach out directly with Oasis? I'm having trouble connecting my ledger to the DSR, which is like a really simple thing, but I can't figure out. For some reason, it's just not working.
You're doing ledger straight into oasis.app/save or
yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, cool. Yeah, you know what you could do? I could put you in touch with somebody that'll help you. Yeah. Do you have me on Telegram or are you on Rocket Chat by chance?
No, I'm not, but I will be. I can go ahead and do that tonight. I know we talked about that in the past. Is that the best way to reach you just in general?
Yeah, generally speaking, like our Rocket Chat, like our whole team is on there and there's a ton of people in the community who are super helpful on there. So if you go on to help, they could definitely help you. There's a help channel there. There's also a dev channel there. And generally speaking, I could connect you virtually to anybody in the org through Rocket Chat.
Got it. I will work on creating that tonight and get back to you. So my follow-up question is a little bit more big picture. And it's possible that I've just missed this over the past couple of weeks, but as far as adding different digital assets and giving them vault capability, is there a timeline or any type of, bigger picture target for number of assets for Maker? I mean, I'm mad. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just nodding along with your question. Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. There isn't a hard timeline because I think a lot of the collateral onboarding stuff has been being reworked currently. So we put out some stuff on collateral onboarding earlier in the year, but since then, the interim risk team has grown to have a working group of community members that are working on the collateral onboarding process itself. So there's stuff, I know we've been saying this for like the last 2 or 3 weeks, actually the last couple months, but we're going to have some stuff coming out really soon for collateral onboarding. And obviously, I think like the goal in the community in general is to get as much quality collateral as possible onto Maker as quick as possible, because ultimately that strengthens the protocol. But as for timeline, it's hard to say because there's like several factors that impact it. For example, like the length of time it takes to properly assess the collateral, and then also like if the collateral doesn't already have things built for it, like certain different ERC20s need different adapter types to actually be able to be used in the Maker protocol. So there's a few different things that kind of impact the timeline, but I know everybody in the org and in the community is kind of like all hands on deck, working to do it in a responsible, transparent, and like above board way. If that makes
Absolutely,
sense.
yeah, which I highly appreciate. Yeah, I was just curious if I had missed anything that was set in stone, but that's great. I mean, ultimately for my project to work, I mean, we need in the perfect world, we would have hundreds of assets that we could do this with. And I know that is the goal of MakerDAO, but that's awesome. Okay, well, thank you, David. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think just in general, like the way I've been thinking about like the meta is, once we go through maybe in the first 2 years, I'd say maybe we onboard 1 or 2 or 3 collaterals. But after that, I think probably the process will become a lot faster. And yeah, who knows? But yeah, I think that is coming. But you haven't missed anything. I don't know. Am I frozen? Ugh. No. Am I frozen? No, I'm not. Okay, good. All right, cool. So cheers, everybody. Thank you for coming to the call. I'll see you guys next Tuesday.